The New York Rangers rolled the dice with the reacquisition of JT Miller last season. Today, we tell you why it was a risk they needed to take.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1360 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Jon Chik. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So today we go ahead and we continue our fun-filled offseason series, the Everydayers. You guys are well aware of this. We do this every single offseason. Basically, we just take a look at the upcoming season and we go basically player by player throughout the Ranger roster, taking a look at what to expect from them this upcoming season. What are the best case scenarios? What are the worst case scenarios? And then we throw out a couple of predictions and just the overall outlook of any given player on any given day. And today it just so happens to be JT Miller. He's going to be the player that we focus on for today's episode. And we'll start with the bad stuff. We'll get to the good stuff after that. And like I said, at the end, we'll kind of have a verdict and some final thoughts on JT Miller. But it's always good to get the bad stuff out of the way first. And we'll do the worst case scenarios to kick off today's episode. I think in a worst case scenario for JT Miller is he starts to show some signs of wear and tear from over the years. Now, I'm not too worried about this in the immediate future, the short-term future with JT Miller. Not really. I mean, he's been a very durable player and somebody that seems to enjoy going out there and playing a physical brand of hockey and that rough and tumble style, and it hasn't really cost him any playing time or any significant playing time, certainly in recent seasons. So I'm not too worried about this, like this upcoming year or the year after that. But in the long term, it is at least possible that he begins to get a little bit beaten up, a little bit worn down from this extremely demanding, extremely physical style of hockey that he's been playing for years now. He does have another 5 years remaining on his contract with the New York Rangers, and that means he will be 37 years old when the contract ends. So it certainly is possible that by the tail end of that, the last year or two especially, that, okay, he's slowing down because he's a little bit beaten up. Maybe the injuries start to pile up at least a little bit. But again, somebody who plays a very physical style in 871 career regular season games, 1,664 hits. That's a pretty significant number if we're being honest. The guy's a wrecking ball. The Rangers do need players like that. But again, it is possible that that starts to catch up with him, at least at the very tail end of his career. I certainly don't look for it to happen, this season. Another worst case scenario is that he ends up being a very volatile player with the New York Rangers and potentially not in a good way. There are times throughout his career where it seems like JT Miller, his emotions have quite simply just kind of gotten the better of him. I still feel that the Rangers need more players like this. They need more JT Millers and not fewer of them. And what I mean by that is I would much rather the Rangers err on the side of a player or players that are too emotional. Their emotions can sometimes get the better of them. I would rather err on that side than the side of guys who don't care, guys who don't play with any emotion, or guys who look like robots out there. And as I say all that, it reminds me very, very much of the 2024-2025 New York Rangers. We don't need that. I'd rather err on the guys that care too much. And for that reason, maybe their temper or whatever it might be gets the better of them from time to time. I mean, that can happen. But I mean, you look at what happened in Vancouver, obviously highly publicized, issues in the locker room there between JT Miller and Elias Pettersson. They're two of their superstar players and just couldn't get along. Their styles clash. Their personalities seem to clash. And the last thing that the Rangers need is more locker room drama. I remember doing an episode after the Rangers traded for JT Miller last season. And somebody, I don't remember who it was, so I'm sorry. This is like going back months, though. But somebody in the YouTube comment section left a pretty funny comment after the JT Miller reacquisition by the Rangers and said, yeah, might as well go ahead and throw a rattlesnake into the locker room. And I laughed at that. But there's some truth to that, too. I mean, look, again, this could go any which way with JT Miller. There are times where, like we said, it can go south, and he can, let his emotions get the better of him, like we were just talking about. So I certainly do acknowledge that. But to me, again, this is a risk that is more than worth taking for the New York Rangers. They need some more fire, some more energy, some more passion, some more intensity. And JT Miller, we know he's going to give you that. So you take the risk with the potential reward being there as well. And one other worst case scenario for JT, and this is one that I'll kind of build on the last one that we just mentioned, some sort of a locker room feud with another player on the New York Rangers. We mentioned the Elias Pettersson situation from last season and how that got to the point where, Vancouver pretty much had to get rid of one or the other. That locker room wasn't big enough for the two of them. Could something similar happen here? Could JT Miller at some point find himself at odds with a current member of the New York Rangers, where him and somebody else just don't get along, don't see eye to eye, and it's a similar situation? The whole thing that I just mentioned, the locker room ain't big enough for the two of us. The reason I don't think that'll happen, though, is I don't even know who that would be on the Rangers. Like, who's really going to get in JT Miller's face that's on this roster right now? Mika Zibanejad. Do you really think Mika Zibanejad is going to, get in JT Miller's face and be ready to throw it? I doubt it. I really doubt it. If anything, Mika would kind of fall in line with what somebody like JT Miller is expecting. We saw that this past season when the two of them were line mates, and obviously that was made a positive impact on Mika Zibanejad. Him and Vincent Trocheck, JT Miller and Vincent Trocheck, they're good friends. Obviously, they play with a certain edge to their game as well, but they've always been on the same page. They've always been close friends. So yeah, I don't even know who that would be, but I guess it can't be ruled out either because we have seen JT Miller, get into it with teammates in the past. But that's pretty much it as far as like worst case scenarios are going. I'm going to shift our attention in just a second to the best case scenarios for JT Miller, all the good stuff. And then, like I said, at the end of today's episode, we'll do some predictions on JT. We'll have, just an overall season outlook for JT Miller. Going to be doing all that good stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you are also building wealth. We've all been in that situation in the past where the expenses just kind of pile up quickly. You look at your bank account and you wonder, hey, where did all my money go? You might be taking the family out to a Rangers game, or you might be going out for dinner, or you might be planning a vacation, whatever the situation might be. And those expenses can quickly and quietly pile up. But the bottom line, that's where Monarch Money comes in. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the Everydayers. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting this podcast. In our next episode, not sure exactly what we're going to do, but I do know that throughout the offseason here, we're going to keep rolling with these best and worst case scenarios for all the different players on the New York Rangers. It's going to be a lot of fun, looking at everything that could go right, everything that could go wrong, and making some predictions together. And, we'll keep that going moving forward for sure. But for right now, let's go ahead and get into the best case scenarios for JT Miller. He's the man of the hour. We're focusing in on him in this episode. I think in a best case scenario, JT Miller is named the next captain of the New York Rangers. I haven't been shy about saying this. To me, JT Miller is the best pick to be the next captain. We've talked about on here, and I think a lot of you have talked about this as well, on this podcast or otherwise, that the Rangers need a shock to the system. They need something different. They need to go in a different direction because what we saw last year was completely and totally unacceptable. And I realize there might be differing opinions on who the next Ranger captain should be. I think JT Miller certainly has his supporters. I think there's certainly going to be some people listening to this or watching this that would like the Rangers to go with Vincent Trocheck. He's certainly an option as well. You could even throw Adam Fox in there, but as I've mentioned in the past, I think of those three, Adam Fox would be my last choice, simply because I just don't see him as like that vocal, rah-rah leader that you need as a captain. It's nothing against Adam Fox. I think he can continue on as an alternate, but to me, just his whole demeanor doesn't really scream captain. That's just me. I have to be honest about it. JT Miller is my pick overall. And as far as Trocheck goes, I mean, he's a good pick too, and you could certainly make a strong case for Vinny Trocheck, but he was also part of this like complete mutiny or collapse or whatever we saw last season. There was such little leadership or anything, that just made the Rangers look like a team that wanted to play hockey, and he was here for that. Now, he was a phenomenal player the year before that. There were times this past year where it did seem like Trocheck was stepping up a little bit as a leader. I remember a press conference with Peter Laviolette when he was asked about, who's stepping up in a leadership role now that Jacob Trouba is no longer here. And the two players that he mentioned were Ryan Lindgren and Vincent Trocheck, neither of whom were wearing letters, by the way. So that says a lot in and of itself. I mean, Trocheck certainly has some leadership capabilities, but again, I lean toward JT Miller. You guys let me know what you think as far as who the next Ranger captain should be. But in a best case scenario for myself personally, yes, JT Miller is the guy. You slap the C on him going into this season. I'm still wondering if it's actually going to happen, but we'll see. We'll see if that ends up happening before this upcoming season. I think also in a best case scenario, you have a situation where JT Miller elevates Mika Zibanejad. Now, on one hand, Mika Zibanejad is your supposed top line center. I mean, you could rank them in any order, whether it's Mika or Trocheck or JT Miller. And I would like to have Mika playing on the wing with JT Miller, but I mean, he's certainly being paid like it, right? Mika Zibanejad is making $8.5 million per season for the next 5 years. And that does sound a little bit scary when you look at how he played this past season and just how much it looked like the intensity, the fire, the passion, they just were not there for Mika Zibanejad. However, as we mentioned in our Mika Zibanejad episode, where we did best and worst case scenarios for Mika, it must be said that Mika's game noticeably improved once the Rangers traded for JT Miller and once Mika Zibanejad was put on a line alongside JT Miller. You look at his numbers before the trade, and JT Miller's first game with the Rangers was on February 1st last year. So before the trade, Mika had a grand total of 9 goals, 20 assists, for just 29 points in 50 games. He was also a minus 25 for that time period. Then once JT Miller was back, these are Mika's numbers after the trade. 11 goals and 22 assists for a total of 33 points in 32 games. He was also a +3. That cannot be ignored. And I realize there's other factors, and Mika typically, even during some of his best seasons, he does seem to be something of a slow starter. But it goes beyond just the numbers. It's the mindset that we saw from Mika Zibanejad. Mika Zibanejad actually started playing some hockey toward the end of this past season. And as I mentioned before on here, it wasn't perfect, but it was a hell of a lot better than what we were seeing at the start of the season. And so, again, Mika at $8.5 million per season should not need somebody to fire him up, but JT Miller is just the guy for the job. He will keep you honest out there. And that's not just Mika, that's anybody that plays with JT Miller. So we can add that to the whole best case scenario for JT Miller is that he's somebody that can and likely will elevate his line mates. I think that you want to start next season with Mika Zibanejad on his wing because it worked. It clicked. Mika played better. JT Miller obviously played well. Let's not break that up. I know that by putting Mika with JT Miller, it means that you would probably have to go with either Parson or Brodzinski as third line center. Go with Johnny B for the third line center. Let's see what he can do. Let's give him a chance. He actually looked like he cared last season. Keep Mika with JT Miller and let JT Miller continue to elevate Mika Zibanejad again to play a better brand of hockey where Mika actually forechecks once in a while, backchecks once in a while, even threw a couple of hits. We saw him throw a couple of hits while he was playing with JT Miller last season. He was not going to be doing basically any of that before he was put on the same line with JT. So in the best case scenario, JT continues to demand the best from Mika Zibanejad. That's going to be very important for the Rangers this upcoming season. I think also in a best case scenario, JT sets a good example for the young players on the Rangers. As we know, as we're well aware, as all of us very plainly witnessed last season, there wasn't a whole lot of that from the Ranger veterans for pretty much the entire 2024-2025 campaign. Honestly, man, I mentioned Johnny Brodzinski a second ago. The Rangers' veteran leader last season was Johnny Brodzinski. When you look at some of the different things that we heard about and some of the different things that we saw, the Rangers were in Minnesota to play the Wild, and Brodzinski's from that area or has a house there, one or the other, or both. But I think he's from Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, Johnny Brodzinski had all the young guys over to his house. Him and his wife basically cooked a Thanksgiving feast for everybody, and good times were had by all. He had all the young players over to his house. And even just little things like you saw this with Gabe Perreault when he started with the Rangers toward the end of last year. And he only played in, I think it was 4 games with the Rangers. But Pro before the game, man, he's hanging out with Johnny Brodzinski. He's not hanging out with Panarin or Kreider or Mika or any of these other guys that are, supposedly the leaders of this team. Brodzinski, it seems to me, just found a way to make himself, more comfortable, or make the players more comfortable with him. So with all that said, the Rangers need more veteran leadership. And I think JT Miller is the guy that can step up and provide exactly that. He can certainly step up in the off-ice stuff and hopefully, be somebody that's there for young players if they need anything. But also, just the way that he plays hockey. I mean, his style of play is something that you want to emulate. His straight line style of hockey, his forechecking, his physicality, just the fact that he gives a damn. That's very, very obvious. There's people that like JT Miller. There's people that don't really like him so much, but I don't think anybody would question his passion for the game and the intensity with which he plays. And one guy that I think can really learn from JT Miller, as far as the younger players on the Rangers, and we mentioned this not too long ago in an episode that was kind of centralized on this player, but it's Brandon Othmann. Othmann is a first-round pick by the Rangers. There's a lot riding on him and his development. The Rangers have to be able to get a good amount out of Othmann, and we'll see if he starts this season in the NHL or the AHL. But bottom line, Othmann is going to be with the Rangers at some point this upcoming season. And I think just by emulating JT Miller's game, which I think Brandon Othmann has the tools to do, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as JT Miller, but the similarities are very clearly there. And I think Othmann is the kind of player that JT Miller should be taking under his wing and trying to get the best out of him. And you could maybe even throw Brett Berard in there as well. The similarities aren't quite as apparent, but all of them play with that fire, that energy that you like to see from players and that the Rangers very clearly need more of this season. So JT Miller has to be somebody that can set a good example for young players. And a best case scenario, he does that because, again, there was little to none of that this past season. So that needs to improve this year, and JT can be one of the guys that makes it happen. I think also in a best case scenario, JT Miller gives a new look to the Ranger power play. We've got to get this power play fixed. It was a disaster last season, especially near the end of the year. I mean, what did they go? It was like, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I've probably at least partially repressed it, but I think they went like 2 for 42, 2 for 44 on the power play, something like that. It got to a level that was just unbelievable that any team in the NHL could be this inept and have this few power play goals in this many chances over any period of time. But we saw that with the Rangers this past year after they were a top 3 power play just the season prior. So JT Miller can help the Rangers hopefully revamp the power play. You obviously don't want to over-rely on your special teams, but you want good special teams. I mean, why would you not want that? And we've been talking about how this power play basically needs a new coat of paint, and I think JT Miller can provide that because last year, I mean, it's just the same players and the same approach and the same tentative perimeter passing, the same unwillingness to shoot the puck, the same over-reliance on the same things that just aren't working anymore. Trying to set up Kreider for a tip-in, those kind of went away last year. Trying to set up Mika for a one-timer. I mean, everybody's trying to feed Mika a one-timer, and it just worked so rarely this past season. It's time to switch things up a little bit, both in terms of approach and in terms of personnel. Now, JT, when he came over last year, of course, naturally, he did play on the Ranger power play, and he was almost always on the top power play along with everybody else. So he bears some responsibility for the failures of that group as well. There's no doubt about that. But hopefully with a new coach, a little bit of a new system in place, JT Miller refamiliarizes himself with the Rangers and all of his new teammates, guys that weren't here during his first tenure as a member of the Rangers. Hopefully he can kind of become the straw that stirs the drink a little bit when it comes to the Ranger power play. Even just having somebody new on the top power play unit in JT Miller, or relatively new, I guess we can say, that in and of itself is like a breath of fresh air. And they got to switch things up a little bit here. That power play has to be better than it was last year. There's no reason that a top power play unit that will probably consist of some combination of Fox, Panarin, JT Miller, maybe Mika Zibanejad, maybe Will Cooley, maybe Alexi Lafreniere. You've got some options there, but that's too many good players. That's too many offensively talented players for this unit to be as brutal as it was this past season. So JT Miller, he's going to have to be one of the guys that helps fix that power play unit. So in just a minute, we're going to keep everything rolling. We're going to keep talking about JT Miller, just go through a couple of predictions and overall outlook for this upcoming season. And just conclude the episode with that. Definitely looking forward to doing that. We'll get to that in just a second. All right, let's go wrap up today's episode with some final thoughts on JT Miller, a season outlook, a couple of predictions as well. Let's get started with a prediction for this section. I'm going to say JT Miller ends up wearing a letter for the Rangers this upcoming season. I touched on this very briefly in one of the earlier sections, but I'm honestly beginning to think, and I could be wrong about this, no insider info or anything like that, but I'm beginning to think that the Rangers might go into this upcoming season without naming a captain. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, there's not really like a truly obvious candidate. JT Miller is my pick. He's who I would go with. I'd love to see him be named the captain before the season starts. But like we mentioned earlier, can make a case for him, can make a case for Adam Fox, can make a case for Vincent Trocheck. Maybe there's even a dark horse in there somewhere as well, but it'll probably be one of those three guys. On top of that, there's just a lot of uncertainty after this past year. I don't know that you want to go naming a captain, period, when it comes to, rewarding somebody for whatever that was this past year. And JT Miller wasn't here for all of it. And he did play well. Racked up his points and everything and got the best out of Mika Zibanejad, like we mentioned. But I don't know, man. Like after the kind of season that we just witnessed, do you really want to name anybody the captain? So there's that. And there's also the fact that there's a new head coach. We saw this with Gerard Gallant as well. We all kind of figured that, all right, well, they're going to name a captain this offseason. And it didn't happen. They went with 6 alternates, partially due to the fact that I think Gallant wanted to get to know his team a little bit before he, named a captain. And then, of course, Trouba was named the captain the following offseason. But with JT Miller, I still think he could end up wearing a letter, even if it's not the C. He could end up being an alternate captain for this team. You brought this guy in here to be a tone setter. You brought him in to raise the level of intensity, raise the compete level, raise the fire, raise the energy, and raise the nastiness with which this Ranger team plays. So this is your guy. You really want to shock the system, he should be your captain. But even if you don't make him the captain, I could very, very easily see JT Miller being named at least an alternate captain this upcoming season, and you just go without a captain. Because the Rangers very quietly, this hasn't been talked about a whole lot, the Rangers very quietly have gone down to just 3 alternate captains. That's all that's left. You're down to Artemi Panarin, Adam Fox, and Mika Zibanejad. And I don't think they're going to go into this upcoming season with 0 cap. Well, I mean, you can only have 1 captain, but you know what I mean. Without having a captain and having only 3 alternate captains. They haven't done that in a very long time. The last time that the Rangers had only 3 guys wearing letters, it was all the way back in 2009, 2010. Chris Drury was the captain, and the 2 alternates were Ryan Callahan and Michael Roosevelt. You got to go all the way back to 2009, 2010 for the last time that happened. And so that being the case, I just get the feeling that you'll see at least one other guy getting a letter, and I do think that could be, should be, and will be JT Miller, whether he's named the captain or named one of the alternates. We will see. I think also for this upcoming season, here's something else that I think JT Miller is going to bring to the table for the Rangers. I think you're going to see him drop the gloves a couple of times. It doesn't have to be like 10 times a season. I don't think it will be 10 times a season. Fighting's not as big as it once was in the NHL in general. I think we all know that. And JT Miller himself was in 3 fights last season, but they were all at the Canucks. And then you could also throw in that fight he got into in the 4 Nations. So 4 fights total last season, if you want to group all that together. But, like, who was the Ranger last season that was going to drop the gloves and try to spark the team a little bit? Like, I mean, Rempe, obviously he could do it. Or, somebody like Sam Carrick. I think Carrick got into a couple of fights last season, and he's somebody that tries to get under your skin a little bit out there, and I think does play hard. But sometimes I think, and it's nothing against either of those two, sometimes I think that a team needs to see one of their top players do that. One of their leaders, one of the guys wearing the letters. And who was that going to be? Who would it be for this upcoming season? You really think that like Panarin or Mika or Fox are going to get into a fight? And I'm not knocking any of them, but it's just not really part of their game. It's not really in their DNA. You're not going to see that. I don't think any of them have ever been in a fight in their career without going through it. I feel like I would remember that if it had happened. So it's not going to be any of them. I mean, like Trocheck could do it for sure. We saw him get into at least 1 fight last year, maybe 2. But I think JT Miller, man, he's the guy that's going to throw down and get mad and try to change the energy of a hockey game. And I think that can be very important from time to time. Like I said, fighting is not as big as it used to be. It doesn't happen as often. That's probably a good thing. But hockey needs a call back to its roots every now and then. And for the Rangers, they need one of their veteran leaders to be the guy to step up in a situation like that. And I think JT Miller's that guy. If things are going bad, if the Rangers are flat, if they've lost a couple of games and they're down in this game, he won't hesitate to do that. I don't have any doubt about that. So he could bring that to the table as well. I think also Something else that you could certainly expect from JT Miller, something that I'm expecting from JT Miller this upcoming season, is point per game production. They, again, brought him in here to be a game changer in every aspect, not the least of which is his ability to score points. There's so much focus, and I'm guilty of it too, but there's so much focus on, his personality and the way he plays the game. And, he's got to inject some nastiness and some edge into this team. And that's all well and good. But you almost forget that he's also an elite offensive player. And the Rangers need that too. They need him to be every bit of that. And he hopefully will be this upcoming season. He's been a point per game player or more in 3 of the last 5 seasons. Last year, he just missed that threshold. He ended up with 70 points in 72 games between the Canucks and the Rangers. Although with the Rangers, he did get there, 35 points in 32 games. But this is somebody who must lead the way for this team in just about every aspect. And like I said, not the least of which is offensively. After Panarin, you're looking at JT Miller hopefully being the second leading scorer on this team. So JT Miller, man, no pressure this upcoming season. All we need you to do is put up monster offensive numbers, change the culture of this team, convince your teammates to play like they give a bleep, fix the power play, set a good example for young players. Did I miss anything? It's a lot riding on JT Miller, but this is a gamble worth taking. They needed a player like this. They needed somebody that was going to shock the system. They needed somebody that was going to inject some honest-to-God energy into this team. And JT Miller is the guy to do it. There's some risk involved with it. Obviously, he's getting older. And at the very end of his contract, he could be slowing down a little bit. But the Rangers, like I said, they're retooling. They're not rebuilding. And there's no better example of it than this. You don't trade for JT Miller if you're looking to go full-on rebuild. I certainly don't think. And everything else that they've done, it points to a retooling, and they're going to stay the course there. I still like this trade. Again, the risk is worth it, at least as far as I'm concerned. Honestly, man, this team probably should have never traded JT Miller in the first place, especially just for Libor Hajek. Not ideal. But and there were other parts of this trade. I'm just having some fun with it. But it was still a terrible trade. McDonough and JT Miller for essentially a whole lot of nothing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Nemestikov has become a decent player, but he didn't really do much of anything, for the Rangers. Even Brett Howden, I mean, he's got his role with the Knights and everything. But yeah, that was one of the worst trades in Ranger history. And all these years later, at least JT Miller has come home. But we'll call it there. Like I said, JT Miller, a ton riding on him this upcoming season as it pertains to the success of the New York Rangers. This team, I think, honestly, they kind of live and die with JT Miller next year. As they go, he goes, or vice versa, however you want to look at it. But we'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @JChick17. Once again, @JCHIK17. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.